Hello, this is Alan Wheeler, and I'm here on my tarot channel discussing tarot and spirituality. I'm here at my altar with incense going and a candle burning. Yesterday, I recorded the first card in this series that I'm calling Christian Tarot, for lack of a better term. And my disclaimer is that I know fundamentalist Christians will uh, take issue with me, and I know a lot of neo-pagans um, and people on alternative paths, even some New Age folk, so-called, that have an aversion to Christianity. So I will test everyone's love, I guess. But my disclaimer is that the material I'm presenting is from several years back when I was transitioning and expanding my spiritual path. And it was just a stage of progress that might be useful to others, perhaps. I also think if you're a tarot reader and you read for Christians, this could be helpful. And so that's my disclaimer. So I talked about the Fool yesterday, but I did not mention the Fool's journey. Now, the Fool can be seen as a new initiate, someone like a new hire in a company, a rookie, a seeker, um, someone with that spirit of the learner. Um, and sometimes we say, I'm always a seeker, I'm always learning um, in whatever field. So that energy of the Fool is very relevant. Um, but the Fool's journey is that trip through the cards of the major arcana that we're familiar with. Um, and that journey, it could be a spiritual path that it represents, or maybe an astral trip, a meditative journey. And it could just be the new beginning of some project or a new job, or often when I get a new deck of tarot cards, the Fool comes up as I begin working and bonding with that deck. I'm also reminded of the journey of a little bird from a children's book that we used to read our kids when they were young. I think the title was Are You My Mother? And the baby bird was lost, and it was going from creature to creature, from animal to animal, saying, Are you my mother? Are you my mother? And I think there might have been a crocodile, a bear, a frog, a rabbit. Different creatures were saying, No, no, I'm not your mother. And that came to mind today, that's similar in a way to the Fool's journey as he takes on or learns from these different roles, these different energies. None of them are truly home. So he doesn't stop at the magician or the high priestess or the empress or the emperor, but goes on developing in the stages of development. So none of them are the true enlightenment or the true salvation or the transcendence that we might see in the world card, however you want to look at that or apply that. So I'm going to start with the book that was a bridge for me, Meditations on the Tarot, A Journey into Christian Hermeticism. And this showed me this blending of paths or ideas was possible. And the first chapter, letter 1, from this anonymous author. It's written, Dear Unknown Friend. And each chapter has a picture of the Marseille card. So here's the magician, and some opening quotes from scholars or spiritual seekers, philosophers, and a Bible quote. So, due to the topic of this video, I'll read the Bible quote for the magician. "The wind blows where it wills, and you hear the sound of it, but you do not know whence it comes or whither it goes. So it is with everyone who is born of the Spirit." So it's speaking of that kind of anointing, infilling of the supernatural fruits and gifts of the Spirit spoken of by John there in chapter 3. We see the picture here. Now, Levi, as he looked at this and as he designed his tarot deck, he saw in this hat hidden the limniscate, that figure 8 for infinity there. He also thought that the way the figure held his arms here was similar to the Hebrew letter Aleph. And so he read that into the card as well. He noted the elements seem to be represented here: the wand, the cup, the knife, and the coin, which he called pendangles, I believe. But the anonymous author here relates, and here's the color version of the magician here from Marseille. Notes that this juggler, this seems to be the traveling performer, almost a swindler, a charlatan. He discusses these symbols in terms of Hermeticism, which he calls, quote, "the mystery of the communal heart that beats within all religions, all philosophies, all arts, and all sciences, past, present, and future." So he sees in the magician's kind of the ace of the major arcana containing all the pure potential of everything else in those trumps and that set of cards. He does ask the question, why, how can we see this in a juggler, a player of tricks that are pictured on the Marseille card? And he says that the secret lies in the play and the flow that's represented. And I'm very familiar with that from putting in immense amounts of practice for, I perform magic tricks for my classes and for shows. And that with enough practice, it does reach that peak of flow when even I don't know how it happens sometimes. And the anonymous author says that this is the basis of all the major arcana to follow, and it shows the rapport, the relationship between personal effort and spiritual reality, how the two come together. And he calls this concentration without effort. So, some examples or illustrations of this idea. And he just calls this the focus, this intense focus that comes as a free action, and it comes in peace. So we have the statement from the Bible that my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And we see that idea also in Joseph Campbell, who says, follow your bliss and love, do the thing you love to do. And that work becomes enjoyment. The Lao Tzu in Taoism I think it was Wu Wei, but he referred to this effortless action, this flow that comes forth. And we see the idea in yoga. I already talked about performing magic tricks, juggling. A tightrope walker who achieves that perfect balance cannot stop to worry and think, but must be in that perfect flow. And similarly, spiritual gifts, the fruit of the Spirit, actions that flow from the heart rather than forced by some rigid law, because someone made you do something, but it flows from love. And the author calls this the foundation of all mysteries, all mystics, all gnosis, all knowledge, all magic, and all practical esotericism, being one in oneself. So it's I've got a diagram here of this paradox, and this might represent the Fool, that heart of love, being one in oneself, that blank slate. And then I only drew 3, but this could be all the major arcana here. So stepping out into the Magician, this is one role that can be learned. And the High Priestess, and so on. And these are roles or energies that can be taken on. But if the Fool never steps out, never takes the leap of faith, he remains in this state. If he takes on the role and works mindlessly, slavishly, driven, he gets stuck here. So for this to, and I suppose you could make this more complicated, maybe, and say the minor arcana are out here or something, but to reach to transcend this, to make the wheel roll, there's a balance where both are happening at the same time. We don't have a heartless, we don't have the action without rest. We don't have the resting heart without the intention and the putting in the work, basically. So that's just one more way to look at that. Now, the anonymous author closes out once again by saying there's both an invitation and a warning in this card, the card of the magician here. And he says that the invitation is to serve and to love and to achieve this first step as an adept, and to learn to flow in this. And he says the warning is that this can become the path of the charlatan when you don't put in the work to reach that state of flow. And it becomes an illusion, becomes a cheating. He said to remember, as above, so below. So just as there are mirages below that we see illusions and mirages and tricks of the mind, tricks of the eye in this life, in this world. So above, there are mirages as well. So we should test everything. Test with the experience of the senses, with our experience of morality, with the experience of other seekers, and wisdom from the past, and not do things mindlessly. And I'm sure there's a balance between being overly empirical and in this kind of naive, this is all there is, this is what's real, and the other extreme of being overly spiritual and ignoring the reality. Now, in the pictorial key to the tarot, there's the magician on the cover, presumably because he's the key to all the major arcana. And let me read a couple lines here from Waite. He says, above the magician's head is the mysterious sign of the Holy Spirit, the sign of life like an endless cord. He also writes, in the magician's right hand is a wand raised towards heaven, while the left hand is pointing to the earth. This dual sign is known in very high grades of the instituted mysteries. It shows the descent of grace, virtue, and light drawn from things above and derived to things below. So I know some people don't like the tone that Waite takes, but nonetheless, pictured there seems to be that divine motive coming into the human being, the powers and gifts of the Spirit flowing into the human being there. Whoops, I'm losing some of my notes here. So, bear with me. So again, that's the magician, and he is now a ceremonial magician, and he has kind of been upgraded from the more shadowy aspect of the charlatan there, much as the fool has been takes a more optimistic picture in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. So let me close. This is going a little longer than I thought, but let me close with some ideas taken from the website I made a few years ago, and some of the examples that I included there were Joseph and Daniel in the Old Testament, who interpreted dreams, and they were ranked as high or higher than the court magicians and the wise men in Egypt and in Babylon, respectively. Moses had the staff of power that parted the Red Sea. The Magi from the east followed the star to the new light coming into the world. Some of the prophets said that young men will dream dreams and old men will see visions. The Spirit will be poured out on all flesh, young and old, men and women. And so there seems to be a kind of upgrade in the New Testament. We are told we are no longer called servants, but friends. And let me just close with a quote from Thomas à Kempis, who spoke of us as co-creators in a way. He wrote, temporal things cannot draw them to adhere. Rather, they draw temporal things to serve them. And so there's that kind of flow of grace, the fruit and gifts of the Spirit. So thank you so much for watching, and as always, I hope you will find connection with people in your life, with online community, and on your spiritual path, whatever that may be. Take care.